Hello everyone. In this video I'm going to show you how to use a 3D model from Sketchfab in Panda3D. So I'm going to use this model, which is this low poly scene, and it looks very nice on Sketchfab. And I'm also going to add the link to this Sketchfab model to the video description. So in order to download this model, you have to create a login or register on Sketchfab, and then you will have this download 3D model here. And this model is called Fantasy Game In, and it was created by Panda3D. So let's just download this model. So click on this download 3D model, and I'm going to choose the GLTF file format because I'm going to load this first in Blender, do some editing, and then export it out as a Panda3D egg file format. So let's just click on download. So the download is finished. I'm just going to open my downloads folder and just cut out this file. And I created on my desktop a folder called Sketchfab, and I'm just going to move it here and just extract it here. So after you extracted the zip file, you will have a scene.gltf, a scene.bin or binary file, and a textures folder. And in the textures folder you will find these two PNG files. So let's open this scene.gltf using Blender. So here I'm using Blender 2.8.3.13, and I'm using Blender 2.8 because the Pandas egg exporter, so the so-called PRPEE exporter, only works with Blender 2.8. It doesn't work, as far as I know, it doesn't work with Blender 2.9. So let's go to Blender and just delete the default cube and the camera and also this lamp, and go to file and import GLTF2, and go to desktop, Sketchfab, and select the scene.gltf and import it. So it is imported. You have to zoom out because this is somehow translated here. Okay, I'm just going to show you how to clear all these unnecessary translations. So to clear out all these unnecessary translations and rotations, we should go to this upper right corner. So this is a scene explorer, and I'm just going to expand this window and click on these little triangles, and you will find the whole scene tree. Okay, so most of these are absolutely unnecessary. We just can delete those. So let me start with this upper right orientation matrix and just delete this. So right click and delete. So now the model is rotated. So let's select this node, also right click and delete. Let's select this node, right click, delete. Let's select this root node, right click and delete. Let's select this node, also right click and delete. So now it moved the model into the middle of the 3D world, and we don't need also this node, so we can right click and delete. And this node contains the geometry, so don't delete this. So you know this by just clicking on this eye. So it will hide the whole geometry. So if you delete this node, it will delete all the geometry. And one more thing, in Panda, we are looking down on the positive y-axis. So we should also just rotate this model. So let's first rotate it around the x-axis. So rotate x and, oops, let's select it. Rotate x and 90, negative. Yep, and also rotate it around the z-axis, so rotate z and 90. Okay, so we are going to look in Panda from this view, and also just for be sure we should also go to Object and apply all transforms. Okay, so now we have the model simplified, so we don't have in this tree all those translations and rotations. The next thing, if you want to see the textures, you can click here on this icon and it will show the textures. And next step will be to actually export this 3D model as a Panda3D egg. But before you can export it to a Panda3D egg, you should go to this GitHub page. I'm just going to add this page or GitHub repository to the video description, and you should download it as a zip file and install it under Blender as an add-on. So as you can see, this is an egg exporter for Blender 2.8 and Panda3D with render pipeline, and this exporter we are going to use. So let's try to export this as a Panda3D egg file format. So you should select the model, go to the file, of course after you install the Panda3D egg exporter. So, and you will find here the Panda3D egg. So just click on that. I created here on my desktop Panda-eggs map, and I'm just going to select this map. I'm just going to name it fantasy that egg, and here on the right side the only thing I'm just going to check is this apply object transform and export to Panda3D egg. Okay, now let's go to my desktop. Here is the folder Panda-eggs, and here is the exported egg file. So let me open it in Sublime. And okay, so it looks like the geometry, everything was properly exported. So RGB, we have the vertices, the RGBs, the UV maps, vertices, RGBs and UV maps. So I don't know how many vertices we have in this scene, but we can check it in Blender. So here it is, and here it shows it in the upper right corner or the lower right corner. So this model has 33,605 vertices. But the problem I'm seeing is that it exported the egg file, but it doesn't exported the textures. So let's go back to Blender to solve this problem with the texture. Okay, so I have the model selected, and first thing you have to do is go to this material tab. So click on the material icon. And here is a some kind of a material which was generated by Blender based on this GLTF file. We can just delete this material. So here is this minus, just click on that and it will delete that material. And now our model is without texture. So let's create a new material, and it automatically creates a principled BSDF material, which is okay for us. The next step, you can leave everything as it is on the defaults. The next step will be to actually go to the shading tab here, and here we should add. So click on add, texture, and an image texture, and connect the color to the base color, and here just select the PNG file which is already loaded when we imported the GLTF file. So we have back our texture. So, and now let's try to export this file, export as a Panda3D egg. So desktop Panda3DX, and I'm just going to override this previous export. So fantasy.egg, apply the object transform and export to Panda3D egg. And let's take a look. So now as you can see, we have this Panda3D.egg and also the text folder which contains the texture for this 3D geometry. So it looks like that we exported it out as it should. And also here, on line 17, it references this texture. So it is in the text folder and bake_basecolor.png. So we can load it in Panda3D. So the next step will be to actually copy the egg file and also the text folder to our project. So select both and copy and go to PyCharm, and here I already prepared a basic Panda3D application, and here is a My Models folder, and I'm going to right click and paste the egg model and the texture here in this My Models folder. So I'm just going to quickly run through this. So every Panda application needs to instantiate a show base object. So here, when we create this custom class called MyGame, we are inheriting from the show base class. And when we call the MyGame's init method, we also call the show base's init method, which will initialize all sorts of variables, member variables, and methods from the show base class. Here in this line, we just importing from Panda3D core the load PRC file data, and here we are setting some configuration variables like the window size to 1280 by 720, and also setting the frame rate meter to 1, which will show the frame rate meter in the upper right corner of the window, so 60 FPS. And here on line 10, we're just using the load PRC file data and loading the config vars or the configuration variables. And here on line 19, I'm creating a MyGame, instantiating a MyGame object and calling the game.run method. So this will enter the main application loop. Okay, and also here setting the background color to pure black, so red, green, blue, and alpha. So we will have a black window. And now let's take a look on the loading. So I'm just going to copy 2 lines from my second monitor, and here I'm going to paste it. So I'm just going to create a model variable called model, and using the cell.loader.loadModel method, I'm just going to load from the My Models folder. So I'm just going to change it to My Models, and it's called Fantasy. So My Models and the Fantasy.egg, and you don't have to add the file extension. And here I'm just reparenting this model to the renderer so it will be visible. So let's try to run this now. And also move the camera a little bit back, because now the camera is in the same position as the model. So as you can see, it took about 1 second or 2 to load, because this is it has many vertices, this file. So we successfully loaded the model from Sketchfab with all the textures. And in the next step, we are just going to add some simple lighting to this scene. So here I created a light setup.py file, and in this light setup.py I created 2 methods. 2 functions. One is for setting up the ambient light, and one is for setting up the point light. So I'm just going to delete this directional light. We are not using it. So first you have to import from Panda3D core the point light and also the ambient light. And the ambient light, it takes 1 argument, which is the notepad. And here in the body of this function, we're just creating an ambient light node. Here we are setting its color to 0.08 on red, green, and also on blue. We are creating an ambient light notepad, and to the notepad we are attaching this A light or ambient light node. And we are also setting on the notepad the set light to ALMP or ambient light notepad. In the setup point light, it takes 2 arguments, the notepad and also the position. So for ambient light we don't have to set the position because it doesn't need the position, but a point light needs a position. So here also creating a point light node from the point light, and here we are setting, although I'm just going to first just comment out these lines. So the set shadow caster, we are going to use it later, and also just remove this line because we don't need this. So here we are setting the color for the point light to pure white, so 1, 1, 1 and 1, so red, green, blue and alpha. Creating a point light notepad and attaching to the notepad, so attaching new node p light. And here we are setting its position to pos 0, pos 1 and pos 2, so by indexing, and this will be, position will be just a tuple. And we also set the notepad, the set light to point light notepad. So I just extracted these things to a separate file so that I don't have to write it in the my game class. And now the next step will be to actually set up the point light. And I'm just going to create one tuple here, which will be the light location. So the light will be positioned at x50, y0 and z50. And then we are going to call the setup point light function. And it is called setup point light. Of course, first we have to import this setup point light from the light setup module. So here it is. It is just commented out, so I'm just going to comment it back. So from light setup import setup point light function and also the setup ambient light. And when we call the setup point light, we are going to set a point light on the model. So it takes as its first argument a notepad, which will be the model itself. So the fantasy.egg, and it needs light location, which is this tuple. So here a position, which is set here. And let me see what we have now. So this is the next problem, and so the whole scene has this red color, this emitted red color. And it took me about 5 to 10 minutes to actually figure out what's the problem with this. And I'm just going to show you how to solve this problem with this red color. So as I said, I tried out some solutions, just like setting the color here, but nothing changed. So every time I changed the color, it was always just red. So then I looked into the egg file and I found out the problem in the egg file itself. So let's just open the egg file, which is this fantasy.egg, and I'm using Sublime Text for this. And if you take here on the emit R, so the emit red is set to 5, then the emit G, so emit green, is set to 0, and the emit blue is set to also to 0. So here it reads this emit R or emit red, and it emits this red color, which is set to 5. So the best solution to actually remove this 5 and set it to 0, and then save the file, so Ctrl S, and just copy this file over to PyCharm, to the My Models folder, and paste and just override the old file. And now let's take a look. And it loads it. It takes about 2-3 seconds when it first loads it. And now, as you can see, the red light is gone, so we don't have that emitted red light. So the next step will be to add a little bit of ambient lighting, because if I move back the camera, as you can see, here are these parts of the model are totally black. So we are going to lit these parts using ambient light. And as I showed you, I already created this function which creates an ambient light or the ambient light, and we are just going to use this function. So here we are setting up the point light, and on the next line I'm just going to call the setup ambient light, and it takes a notepad, and for the notepad we are going to give it the model itself. And now let's try to run it. And now, as you can see, this part of the model is not that pure black as it was before the ambient light. And one more thing what I'm going to add to this scene is shadows. So now it still just looks a little bit flat. And okay, so for shadows, let's go back to the light setup.py, and here in the setup point light I commented out this line which sets the shadow caster. So I'm just going to remove the comment. Soplight that set shadow caster to true, and so this will create a texture in the memory. And this texture, on this texture, it will cast the shadows. And the size of this texture is 1024 by 1024. And one more thing I think we are missing. Yes, it still doesn't cast the shadows, because, let me see, I have to run this command. So self.render.set shader auto. And now if I run it, now as you can see we have shadows. Although it is not perfect. Let me see here, let's say, if I can move the camera. So as you can see, here are some gaps in the shadow. I don't know what causes it. Probably, I don't know if it is the fault of the model itself, or it is the fault of the Panda3D. I'm not sure. But at least we have some shadows here. I just try to increase the shadow map size from 1024 to 2048 by 2048, but the problem with the shadows is still, so here as you can see there are still these gaps, and also here. So I don't know what is the solution for this. So I'm just going to change this back to 1024 by 1024, because it doesn't help to actually increase this texture size. So just make this scene a little bit more interesting, I'm just going to add an icosphere which will represent the light itself. So at least we will see where is the light positioned, and also some movement to the light. So you will see how dynamically this shadow can be changed. So I'm just going to copy 3 lines from my second monitor, and after the render.set shader auto, I'm going to create a self.sphere, and using the loader.load model, and from the library models, from the models folder, the MISC folder, I'm going to load the sphere.egg. And this sphere.egg comes pre-installed with Panda. I'm going to set the sphere's location to the exact same location where the light is located. So here I'm just unpacking the tuple, this tuple, and also reparent the sphere to the renderer. So now if I run it, we will see that here is the light bulb. So here is the point light positioned. And now I'm just going to create a method called moveLight. Of course, I'm just going to copy and paste. So moveLight, and we will get the frame time. So using the global clock.get frame time, and this returns the elapsed time since the application was started. And we should also import the cosine and the sine functions from the mat library. So I'm just going to go here up, and from mat import sine and cosine. And here we are just going to set the sphere position in every frame. to cosine of frame time and scale up by 50, so times 50 on the x-axis, and on the y-axis it will be sine of frame time times 50, and on the z-axis it will be set to 40. And now let me see. We should also add this move light to the task manager, so it is being called in every frame. And let's do this here. So by adding this to the task manager, this method move light will be called in every frame, which is 60 times in a second. So now let's see it. Of course, the light is still only the light bulb rotates. We should also add so that the light rotates with the light bulb. And we can do this just by going to the light setup, and here is the setup for the point light, and I'm just going to return the PLNP, so the PLNP, so the point light notepad we created here. And when we call the setup point light, I'm just going to save it to self.plnp equals setup point light, and this function returns the point light, so we are saving it here to self.point light. And here I'm just going to set the self.plnp that set position to self.sphere that get position. And now the light, the point light notepad should move with the sphere. Let me see. And now we have a much interesting scene. So as you can see, the shadow rotates with the light. Okay, I cannot upload this code. I mean the code, yes, but I cannot upload the model to my GitHub because it is downloaded from Sketchfab and I don't have the right or the license to actually redistribute this model. But so I'm just not going to upload this code and the model. I'm not going to upload to GitHub because let's be honest, this is a very simple scene. So I'm just going to show you once again the full code. So these are just usual stuff, and here are you can just pause the video and copy the code if you want. And here is the light setup, the whole code. So that's all what I wanted to show you in this video, and I'm actually going to create one more video on how to import a model from Sketchfab and actually create some PBR or physically based rendering. So this will be the next topic for the next video. And of course, thanks for watching and have a nice day.